Welcome to FOBtv, the future of business. I'm your host, Kevin Benedict, and it's Valentine's Day, and I want to welcome everyone to the show today, and especially our guest, which I'm so excited to have on the show today, Suhas Uliyar. Suhas, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Kevin. It's great to be on your show and good to see you.
I know it. So you and I have touched base every year for probably over a decade, I think. And it's
so now, yeah.
Through different companies, different progressions of technology. I remember when we're all speaking about mobility and cloud and the original AI digital assistants and all kinds of stuff. So, but before we jump into that, let me just have you introduce yourself and the titles and area of responsibility at Oracle that you now are responsible for.
Sure, Kevin. So I'm now the Senior Vice President for Product Management in our Oracle Health and AI division. This was a division created after the acquisition of Cerner, I think back in 2021 or so. And I've been in this role now for just about 5 or 6 months. And I'm responsible for reimagining what we refer to as the electronic medical records, the EHR or the EMR, by infusing and immersing AI into the way physicians and nurses interact with medical records.
Wow. Now, that must be a super rewarding area because you're right in the middle of health, public health, revolution in healthcare, all of that. Tell us about, how you feel about that.
Kevin, the last 6 months, I wake up every morning. I sleep for about 4 or 5 hours, and it is perhaps the most meaningful and purpose-driven job I've done in my career. Not saying that my other jobs weren't fun, but that all culminated into this. And the reason I feel that way is we all have been patients, and we've seen doctors, go and visit doctors, and we only feel what we feel, but we don't sort of realize what doctors go through or the medical professionals go through in more general, right? And they're burnt out. They are burnt out. And among many reasons, one of the primary reasons is that the software, instead of helping us, come in their way. If you see the amount of documentation they have to do and the amount of administrative burden we put on top of that, what makes it really exciting for me is, and a very important responsibility, is to ensure that providers are able to go back to doing what they do best, which is take care of their patients, which is what they really want to. I've spoken to so many doctors and nurses, and that's what really drives them. And so it's really exciting for me to wake up every morning with my team and say, how are we going to make this better? How do we use things like AI to really sort of drive and reduce their administrative burden and help them and really augment and automate a lot of the work that they're doing? So that's how I really enjoy it. It's great.
Oh, thanks for sharing that, Suhas. So it's Valentine's Day.
Oh, yes. Don't remind me of that. I haven't done anything yet.
I'm reminding you. So, Suhas, you consider yourself a romantic?
Oh, of course. Absolutely. But you'll have to ask my wife because she's going to disagree. But now you put some pressure on me. I'm going to go get something for her now.
Well, there's DoorDash, there's Instacart, all these great things.
Thank God for technology, eh?
Now, I want to know, you've been working with AI for quite a number of years at Oracle.
Yeah.
And last year, there's this huge upswell in the use and introduction of generative AI. How did that impact your role? Because you've been building your own stuff for a long time, and suddenly everyone's using AI.
Absolutely. Like you said, right, 30th November 2022 marked that significant event in AI technology, just in technology in general, but AI specifically, with the adoption and introduction of ChatGPT, right?
Yeah.
And that was a tectonic shift in the landscape. But you know what, Kevin? Large language models have existed in various forms prior to that. And as you know, we've been working on that. But, their impact paled in comparison to what we're witnessing today. I would say this, back to the comment you made about mobile, right? This development is so similar to the evolution of mobile phones, right? Early on when you had the Nokias and the BlackBerry, they were advanced, but it wasn't until the iPhone at the advent of the iPhone, that the app market, the phone app market, and the phone market exploded, shaping our current reality, right? Where, the funny one, there's an app for everything, right?
Yes.
Similarly, what I see, what's happened to us with generative AI and large language models is that it's now become part of our DNA as we design and develop new products. I'm reading this really cool book that we'll talk about that in more detail. It's called The Coming Wave by Mustafa Suleyman, who's the co-founder of DeepMind and now Inflection. And in that book, he cites John McCarthy, who coined the term artificial intelligence. And he says, this is really funny because as soon as it works, no one calls it AI anymore. Okay. And the joke for those AI developers is those building against what computers can't do is what's called AI. Once it can, it's just called software. Right. And so, it's very similar. I mean, it's sort of just thought about this, and it's no longer an afterthought. It's just, it's very similar to when you build a UX now, nobody sort of says, I'm going to build a desktop or a web top UX and a mobile UX. It's just given. It's in your realm of thinking, right? And similarly for me and my team, this is now just part of software and what we do, right? One of the things, Kevin, as product managers, right, we are uniquely positioned to harness the potential of AI in driving product discovery and development, right? And it's not just about efficiency, functionality. It's beyond the optimization of existing processes. It's opening like new doors of possibility of thinking, enhanced decision making. So, generative AI has really made product managers to redefine what is achievable.
Wow.
Sorry, long answer to a short question, but it has really changed the way I'm thinking.
We need to learn more about that here in a moment. So you personally, how are you using generative AI? Do you use it hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, and for what purposes?
Multiple times a day. I wouldn't necessarily hourly, but multiple times a day. And for a number of reasons. A lot of it is when I'm trying to create, when I have an idea about a certain feature functionality, right? I tend to be very verbose, as you saw from my answers too, right? And executives don't have that much time to read and review. And I have a hard time sort of summarizing the salient points of what I'm trying to say. So I use GPT quite a bit, or generative AI quite a bit, to basically help me summarize these documents. And when I look at it, I said, okay, yeah, it makes all sense, So a lot of sort of, drafting and summarizing content, right? But I've also been using it a lot to understand the market, right? In a product management world, like, it's very interesting when we talk about, trying to do competitive analysis as an example, right? Now, we got to take competitive analysis with a pinch of salt because you're only sort of reading what people want you to read about their company. But, being able to surf the internet and get content and then being able to shape that, give that all to a generative AI component to sort of say, help me understand really how are they positioning it? What's really happening? What do customers feel about it, right? And so I use that quite a bit. And the third thing is to do very quick prototyping. I don't need to wait for engineering, even me in my role, right? When I'm in front of a customer, they say, I wish we could do this. And, and they're still thinking, I wish my UX could do this. And I just said, do you use ChatGPT? Yeah, of course we do. How about, you have a conversation with your data like this, right? Well, I'll give you one quick example. So today, to understand the history of a patient from a problem perspective is very hard. So for instance, let's say you have a chronic condition, diabetes, and you say, tell me about the diabetes of this patient, for this patient. Now imagine there's data that's in the current EHR, there's longitudinal data coming from multiple places. Now you're going to bring all of that together to give you a timeline of when was the first time the patient presented that they were diabetic, and now how has it progressed based on the medications that have been given, based on their weight loss or weight gain that's happened. There's a lot of parameters, right? Today, it's roughly about 30, 40 screens, about 100 clicks, and a lot of cognitive use for them to really understand that whole picture of the patient, right? You just ask AI, and it can just sort of summarize that whole thing from the time you went to time now, right? In a format that you want. Now, what we're doing there is we're also providing graphics as part of the response. So for instance, if it's about show me the medication or show me the vitals. Doctors don't want to just see vitals. They want to see the vitals as it impacts to the medication they're taking, right? So I'm able to very quickly prototype this rather than wait, 2, 3 weeks for my engineering team to do anything. So it's actually incorporating this in all parts of what I do every day when I wake up.
Oh man, I can't wait. That's fascinating. Just every single day, I get new ideas from generative AI.
Yeah.
And as you said, I will get information from one platform, then I'll, for example, Chat GPT, and then I'll take the 10 answers from Chat GPT over to Gemini, Google Gemini, and I'll say, hey, can you read this? What do you think? Is this accurate? Is there something missing? Would you add to it? And then I'm getting all these multiple platforms to kind of cross-check each other to make sure I'm not, at least I'm not forgetting or missing something obvious.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's such a way to stimulate my thinking. Man, I'm just such a fan. I'm having the time of my life. Now, I've been doing a lot of digging and writing lately about the concept of digital assistants, AI digital assistants, and as contrasted and compared to digital coworkers that may actually do everything that you do.
Yeah.
Where do you see that taking place? Is that possible? Are you seeing examples of that? What's your thoughts?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, that's an area that we are investing heavily. I would say in the definition of artificial narrow intelligence, or ANI, they're quite narrow in their purpose. They're very purpose built and really to sort of help give answers or take minimal actions to natural language queries that you have. But the digital worker, think about it as your sidekick, right? As your digital employee. I'll start by giving you an example. So imagine that you were making an offer to a candidate, right?
Yeah.
So typically what that happens is once you've sort of done your interview rounds and negotiated, now you sort of make an offer. You go to your application, you make up an offer, then you sort of send it forward, then you have like 8 levels of approval, and then you go to talk to your, the HR and sort of figure out everything is good. And if there is a question and it comes back. So there's a lot of these sort of things that go on right now. If you take the front end of the process, which is recruiting itself, right? There's a lot of things that happen, which is I need an approval to hire somebody. Then I need to go and create a job rec. Then I need to go and make sure that I set up an interview loop with 5, 6 people, get their feedback, that whole process. Now, imagine that you had a digital worker that was designed to handle certain capabilities of that process. And it had sort of reasoning, it had planning as part of that, right? Where it could basically sort of, instead of just saying, how many recs do I have, right? That's your digital assistant. But here it's sort of go create a rec for me and set up a chain of actions that's needed to actually hire somebody, right? Now you have multiple digital workers. One digital worker has this boundary of what they know, no different to like us as people. We have knowledge about certain things we do, and then we go to somebody else to get that knowledge, right? So imagine you had these pockets of knowledge, but these are all digital workers that amongst themselves knew how to orchestrate this whole process, right? So that is sort of where digital workers go, where it basically can do things like, for instance, hey, I've got this candidate now. I'm going to set up a loop for these 5 people. So it'll actually go and connect to their digital coworker and say, set up a schedule for Kevin to interview this person at that time, and create the Zoom session and have everything ready for you. It's a participant in that Zoom session. So as you're interviewing the candidate, it's actually taking notes and summarizing and be able to then tell you what the strengths and weaknesses are, right? And then sort of collate from the rest of the team and then give you a recommendation of whether you should hire or not. Obviously, that's what I mean by augmentation. It's actually helping you with the content so that you can then decide what you want to do. Ultimately, it's still the human that decides whether you should make an offer or not, right? So this is sort of, there are multiple examples where it's basically, think about it as pockets of knowledge that is able to do actions based on the context, based on memory, based on personalization, and has the capability to plan and execute rather than just give an answer from the back end.
So in those examples of those digital workers, are those examples of a narrow application of AI where they know the input and output and what their parameters are, and then they can collaborate with particular rules and hand off that information and gather more? Or is that some broader definition than what we might think of as narrow?
So today, I would say they're still narrow in that they're characterized by systems that are specializing in performing specific tasks within predefined boundaries. We haven't come to the level of artificial general intelligence yet. I mean, this is the beginning of it. And if you read this books that I'm reading, they're definitely sort of getting there with quantum computing and the kind of data that they have, where you can truly represent a hypothetical, future stage where machine possesses human-like general intelligence, where you don't have to sort of say anything. You just say to this entity, I want to hire somebody, and it just knows what to do. We're not quite there yet. Yeah, much purpose-built with narrow intelligence, but much more broader than digital assistants. Assistance really, as the word suggests, is really sort of giving you just simple answers and not really planning for you and not executing for you. That's sort of the next generation of assistance where you can actually take action based on that.
So can you imagine a time, Suhas, where above the digital workers is more of a supervisor level artificial intelligence, which has its set of KPIs that oversees the digital agents below it, and it has its supervisor level, and then above that, maybe there's even a management level AI system that's aggregating, that's summarizing, that's reviewing overall KPIs. Have you seen that, and can you imagine that being something that takes place?
I'm reading about it. There are a lot of papers I've read where that is in motion. I haven't seen that in action yet. Yeah. There are certain areas that we are trying to figure out with that. And I would say that, yes, there will be those higher level workers, if you like, don't know what the right term would be, or agents that will look at sort of what each is capable of, has a history, and is able to do planning without predisposition of the knowledge of what it's doing. And I also believe that at that same level, you will have something that's looking at things like ethics and bias and those kind of things, that's able to sort of then provide some level of knowledge about how to do things the right way.
Now, I think the last time you were on the show and we were talking about this, we talked a little bit about emotional intelligence. Where, how are we evolving in that space today?
So I think, again, Gen AI and large language models are certainly helping, because it's now able to sort of harness all that levels of how best to respond to somebody, right? And being able to automatically sort of say, I'm sorry, or, how can I help you? That had to be all hard-coded before, right? And then the voice now is basically, I mean, even with things like speech and image and all that, and now you add video to it, is able to understand body language. Is able to understand, the variations in voice as you get emotional, and is able to react immediately, right? Rather than just natural language analysis of emotion, is able to understand sort of your facial and your voice emotions to be able to then dynamically sort of respond back in that manner. And that's very important, because, again, I go back to my healthcare and where I'm using this, right? It's interesting that no matter how much technology you put, like, you probably see patient consumer portals and so on and so forth, still 95% of incoming patient interaction is still via phone calls, right? And so being able to, on that phone call, be able to identify how the patient is truly feeling. Is it an emergency versus, and people are typically hysterical when there's a big problem, right? So being able to calm down and make it much more soothing in the way it responds, because you can't have your administrative staff take all these calls. It's the same problem that you have with customer service. So it's customer service is the patient service, right? And so being able to understand the emotion, being able to calm that's sort of where that emotional response is getting a lot more, is getting a lot better.
Wow. So talk to us about other use cases that you're witnessing out there and reading about or seeing or even participating in.
Yeah, I'll tell you sort of what I'm participating in right now, and then sort of where I see this go in the future. So I mean, I still, having transitioned to this team in healthcare, I still have my digital assistant business and I still have my integration business, but I'm sort of spending a lot of effort on, as I said, reimagining the healthcare business. So the two most exciting areas, I mean, it's one, but most exciting area we're working on is the clinical digital assistant. And what's different from a traditional digital assistant, I mean, it does have the capabilities for the providers to be able to ask questions like, "Hey, what does my schedule look like today?" "Hey, what's my next appointment? Read the patient information out to me?" And we summarize and we can say, "Okay, Kevin is blah 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 blah. Show me my vitals." So all the classic sort of the digital assistant type capabilities. But where this is going beyond, this goes back to the fact that today, because of all the burden of documentation, which today in an analysis, doctors spend almost 8 hours in addition to patient time for just documentation. So there's almost like a 16-hour day, give or take, right? And they do that, the evenings and late nights, what we call the pajama time. That's sort of where they're feeling burnt out, right? So what we're doing now, we're currently in beta with a bunch of customers, is so as part of that one app, we're in what we call a participant mode between the doctor and the patient. So imagine you're now seeing the doctor. The doctor then puts the device into a participant mode where the digital assistant, the clinical digital assistant, is a part of your conversation. So imagine no different to a scribe sitting there, a human scribe sitting there writing notes, is actually listening in real time, transcribing, identifying who said what, who's the doctor, who's the patient, without any coding, and is able to generate what's called a SOAP note. Now, a SOAP note is not our technology SOAP note. In the medical parlance, it's the structured template for documenting that encounter. So it's called a subjective objective assessment and plan. And there are further sort of protocols within that, as in, HPI, which is a history of present illness, your review of systems, your current, so all that. And it auto generates and creates a draft note before you finish the conversation, the minute you finish the conversation. Yep. Right. And now the doctor literally in front of the patient can review that if they want. They can edit it. It's a draft note. They can edit it and sign off immediately. Now, that's one part. The other part there as well is, as part of the conversation, a typical conversation ends something like an assessment, and a plan, which is, "Okay, I think I'm going to put you on this medication. Maybe you should do this lab test, and then why don't you come back 2 weeks later and let's see how you're doing." So we automate the entire clinical automation process from there. So we identify that, you've got medication. Now, in that medication, we can automatically recognize that you have any allergies, and also determine whether there is any side effects with other medications you're taking, and also help you with your referrals, and set all of those up. So now it's literally the providers are in more looking at augmenting or basically reviewing and approving and signing, instead of having to create all of this, right? Then as we go further down, one of the big things that I'm really excited about is the healthcare system today is pay for service, right? So you go in, if you have insurance, you go get yourself treated for something, and then insurance gets billed. Now, if you have chronic conditions, there's this whole new shift happening towards value-based care. And I don't want to spend too much time on that, but healthcare organizations are incented in taking care of you with a certain fee. So if you have chronic conditions like diabetes or hypertension, they want to say, "You know what, let's make sure that Kevin's diabetes is taken care of throughout the year, and we put them on a plan so that he's healthy." And which basically means that you're spending less, and the whole thing is a domino effect. So there, what we do is that there's this thing called hierarchical care conditions, HCCs and all that. But what we do is we'll look at your longitudinal record, and we say, is Kevin actually improving or not? And here are the gaps in the quality of care. So, hey, doctor, you need to make sure that they are following these things. And if they follow these things, you, the doctor, or the organization, is going to make more money. That's all where AI comes in, right? And then, look, one of the things, Kevin, we don't, at least for now, we don't want to be in the position of replacing the doctor. That's not sort of where I want to be. But if you're able to get information that assists them from diagnosis and being able to look at all this additional information, that's sort of all the exciting things we're doing. So those are some examples of use cases, especially in healthcare.
That's brilliant. Wow. I love it. And to think that, what you're doing is allowing the doctor to spend more quality time, have more meaningful interactions with the patient, and less concern and focus on just documenting, which, as you said, a scribe and a natural language understanding AI system is perfectly developed to be able to do that. There's all kinds of statistics I was just reading this morning about the number of misdiagnoses and all kinds of other things that AI can really play an effective role in. But we'll have to talk about that for another time.
Absolutely.
Now, what we're talking about here is a beautiful scenario, kind of a utopian environment where AI is supporting humans and helping us humans be even more humane with our interactions. But, you know, the media focuses a lot on some of the concerns out there, the potential of nefarious actors for doing bad things. Now, talk to us about which ones of those things, where do you find yourself on that optimism, pessimism spectrum? What things are you reading out there that you think are overblown, and which ones do you think are warranted?
That's a great question. Yeah. And again, this books also help me identify what those are. So I would say there are overblown concerns that typically revolve around the apocalyptic scenarios where AI becomes sentient and decides to harm humanity and erase humanity, right? This certainly makes for compelling science fiction, is what I would say. But the likelihood of these scenarios occurring in reality is a lot of debate about this. So I'm pretty optimistic that we'll figure out the boundaries where we control. So the idea of AI spontaneously developing a consciousness or malevolent intentions, I believe is largely speculative and not quite supported by the current understanding of AI technology. So that's sort of where I feel is a little bit blown out of proportion. Do we have to be scared? Yes. But, there's a book that I read a while ago, but it was written by Henry Kissinger and Eric Schmidt.
Yep.
And they talk about this scenario with nuclear and all that stuff. There's a good interview from, I think it was Harvard School did that interview with them or something. I'll remember the name in a minute. But on the other hand, sort of the truly warranted concerns for me are really issues with bias in the AI system, to be candid. I mean, it's all gone to the data, right? The lack of transparency, for instance, even if you use like GPT, right? The ability to do model cards, like to really understand how did it actually come to that? How do you explain the explainability aspect of it, right? So those are the things that do concern me, because especially back to healthcare, they want to know, like, hey, I'm making a diagnosis. This better be, okay, there's a human still, the doctor's still reviewing it, but you never know, right? If someone accepts what you just say, right? So those are the things that do concern me. The other areas are potential negative impacts on privacy, employment, societal structures. So I think that my concerns are grounded in real world examples of AI algorithm displaying really biased behavior or making decisions that adversely affect certain groups of people. I mean, that's really what concerns me, right? So, but it's important to acknowledge that and sort of address the genuine concerns about the ethical and societal impacts. And so I believe that ongoing dialogue and collaboration among stakeholders is happening. I mean, I see that happening in driven by the government and internationally as well. I'm seeing that, but these are essential for navigating these complex issues responsibly.
Absolutely. We see it everywhere. And I'm very happy to see the cooperation and the work being done both in Europe and the US recently to really try to get a handle on that and put some of those boundaries, as you pointed out. So I feel positive about the direction. Hopefully that can actually happen. Now, you've mentioned a few books already that you've read, Suhas. So talk to me about what 3 books would you recommend for people who are trying to get prepared for the emerging future?
The first one I would say is The Coming Wave. That's Mustafa Suleiman. The Age of AI, the book by Henry Kissinger and Eric Schmidt. That was done a few years ago. And then one interesting book I'm reading is called Think Again. This is by Adam Grant. And I think what's interesting about that book is, they talk about, intelligence, right? And intelligence, as defined, is usually seen as the ability to think and learn, right? But with AI and with this rapidly changing world, there is another set of cognitive skills that essentially what they're saying is matters more, which is the ability to rethink and unlearn. And that was very fascinating because it's very hard for us to change our habits. And so rethink is something that we've always sort of prided ourselves on, but unlearn, that's a really hard thing to do. So trying to figure that out.
Absolutely. I just created a meme the other day of a group of cavemen that are just trying to hold on to their existing biases and paradigms until they can retire. They don't want to rethink or relearn. They're just trying to hold on long enough to retire.
Yeah. You bring up how retiring. Can you imagine that there is this generation of people
Yeah.
that grew up not having electricity and they'll die
Yeah.
flying in planes and with electricity. Can you imagine sort of that generational gap?
Ugh.
Right? And so think about it for us now, right? You know, you said about a decade ago, we were talking about mobile technologies, and a decade later, we're talking about this kind of advancements. Imagine what's in front of us now.
It's going to be a ride, Suhas.
Indeed. Indeed.
And in 10 years, if you and I are still recording, it will be a fun conversation.
It will be. Hopefully somewhere in the beach.
Yes, absolutely. Suhas, thanks so much for joining our program today. We appreciate it. We appreciate your insight and just sharing what you're seeing from the front lines. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Kevin. It was a pleasure to talk to you again.